We're dedicated to keeping the memories of each of these great heroes alive, just as the Dutch do their Americans in Margraten. And now I'd like for every Vietnam veteran that's out there to stand up. If you can't stand up, hold your hand up. If you can't hold your hand up, somebody alongside of you stand up and take this. I wanted to salute every one of you, and to tell you how proud I was to serve with you. It's the honor of my life. Welcome home.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. If I could ask all of those who are laying wreaths today to please come forward and take your place at this time. While the wreath bearers get in position, I'd like to take a moment to say a few thank yous and provide some updates on VDMF efforts. I'd like to give my personal thanks to all of the Yellow Hat volunteers, the folks you see around the site today, usually wearing yellow shirts, yellow baseball caps. They are the National Park Service volunteers who work at this site day in and day out. They are the face of almost 5 million visitors every year. They do so much to honor and remember our veterans every day. Thank you. And the staff of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund for all of your hard work throughout the year. I hope we'll see many of you at upcoming events here later this year. Next month, we'll induct 656 Vietnam veterans into our In Memory program, the largest number of veterans ever honored in 1 year. And on Father's Day, the very next day, we'll host our annual Father's Day Rose Remembrance. This summer, we'll host our PTSD and Agent Orange awareness events. And then for Veterans Day, we'll recognize 2 special anniversaries. The 40th anniversary of the dedication of the 3 Servicemen statute, and the 20th anniversary of the dedication of the In Memory plaque. Watch our website for details on all of these events. Now, allow me to direct your attention to the representatives of several of our nation's leading veteran service organizations as they join us in laying wreaths in honor of the fallen. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome bagpiper Chris Jackson, who will be playing Amazing Grace. National Park Service. Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Vietnam Women's Memorial. American Gold Star Mothers. Gold Star Wives of America. Sons and Daughters in Touch, Vietnam Gold Star Children. Volunteers of the Wall. Paralyzed Veterans of America. The American Legion. Disabled American Veterans. Vietnam Veterans of America. Associates of the Vietnam Veterans of America. Veterans of Foreign Wars. And vets. FedEx and the FedEx Mr. Smith and the FedEx Corporation honoring the U.S. Marine Corps 3rd Battalion, 5th Kilo Company. Jewish War Veterans. Scottish American Military Society. 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock PTSD class, Washington, D.C. Ranger Association. 28th Infantry, Lifelines. Horizon Global Veterans Advisory Board. A6 Intruder Association. The AmeriCal Division. The U.S. Army OCS Alumni Association. In closing, let me encourage each of you to reach out and thank our veterans and their families, not just on Memorial Day, but every day of the year. Thank you all for coming. Our ceremony concludes with the playing of taps by Staff Sergeant Brent Proseas of the U.S. Marine Band. After taps, please remain in place while the National Park Service Honor Guard exits the walkway. Honor Guard, please depart the area. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming, for joining us online.
I remember one specific day I want to share with you. The radio crackled, red, we were the red, to expect 20 casualties, multiple frag wounds, gunshot wounds, head injuries. People had lost their limbs. We were 5 minutes out, and I had to assemble the staff to be ready to greet these casualties. I could hear the whoop, whoop, whoop of that helicopter landing before everybody was there. My heart was in my throat. We needed to save these guys. The staff showed up just in time. The litter bearers ran to the helicopters to evacuate the helicopter, bring the casualties to us, where we were standing by with fluids and blood to resuscitate their lifeless bodies. We had more casualties than we could manage at one time. We had to triage the worst and make sure that we did what we could for the best outcomes. One soldier that came in was lifeless, unconscious. By giving him fluids and blood, stopping his bleeding, and resuscitating him, he became conscious. He looked up at me, and we were often referred to as angels because the guys came right off the battlefield. He started to talk to me about where he had come from, what he was doing. The OR was backed up, but we were preparing him to go into surgery. I talked to him, held his hand while we waited. because now we were just in the management of time before we could get the last of our casualties into the operating room. He told me of his dreams. He told me about home. I remember. He looked like my brother. He reminded me of home, something that we didn't think about most of the time when we were in Vietnam. It was too far away and too painful. I remember his face. I pushed that gurney back to the operating room and I said, hang in there. I'll see you tomorrow. I retreated to my quarters, fell asleep, exhausted, and woke up the next day only to find that he had died in surgery. We discovered in Vietnam a thing called shock lung, where the lungs shut down. We learned how to treat them, but not in time for this soldier. And I have to say, it was one of the darkest days I had in Vietnam because I had to recognize that all my effort wasn't actually saving those lives. I am so sorry to that man, to his family, to those on the wall here that we couldn't save. It broke my heart, it broke my spirit, but I remember. And that's what Memorial Day is all about. We must remember. I feel like I failed at that time. It took me years to recover from that one moment, although there were several of them. We often hear about the folks that look us up. I'm out there on the web and people call me and say, do you remember my brother, my fiance? After 50 years, they remember that their fiance never came home. I spent the next 35 years in the Army, looking for answers, learning, leading, and working toward protocols that would save more men and women in war and in crisis. I remember. I know you do too. I hope that our nation remembers. I hope those on the wall remember. I want to thank you all for your support, for being here today. To the families who lost, I'm so sorry that we couldn't do more. To all of you, I thank you for remembering. I salute you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, founder and executive chairman of FedEx Corporation, Frederick W. Smith. Mr. Smith embodies a legacy steeped in service, leadership, and a commitment to excellence. Born in Mississippi and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, Mr. Smith graduated from Yale in 1966 with a degree in economics. He served 4 years in the U.S. Marine Corps, which included 2 tours of duty in Vietnam as a rifle platoon leader, a company commander, and forward air controller in the OV-10. Honored with the Silver Star, Bronze Star, and 2 Purple Hearts, Mr. Smith concluded his military service in 1969. Just a few years later, he launched the original air-ground Federal Express network, which began operations in 1973 to serve the rapidly growing, high-tech, high-value-added sectors of the economy. From a tiny startup with just 14 airplanes, which delivered 186 packages its first night, FedEx has since grown into a $90 billion global enterprise that serves more than 220 countries and territories. Today, FedEx operations include 719 aircraft, more than 500,000 team members worldwide, who currently handle approximately 15 million shipments each day. In Mr. Smith's words, what I learned in the Marines has stuck with me for all these years. When people ask what principles have guided me since I started FedEx, my answer is the leadership tenets I learned in the Marine Corps during my service in Vietnam. Mr. Smith has been named in Forbes' 100 Greatest Living Business Minds and has also been named the top CEO by both Barron's and Chief Executive magazines. Beyond his professional endeavors, Mr. Smith remains deeply involved in philanthropic initiatives, actively contributing to veteran support programs and community outreach efforts. He has always remembered to uphold veterans, having served as co-chairman of both the U.S. World War II Memorial Project and the campaign for the National Museum of the Marine Corps. After being invited several times, I am happy to say he was able to finally accept our invitation today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vietnam veteran Frederick W. Smith.
Thank you, Jim. It's a privilege to be here today to join fellow Vietnam veterans and the families and loved ones of the heroes whose names are on this wall, forever memorialized. It's also an honor to share this stage today with Commander Peterson and General Barbish. No one who served in Vietnam did not revere the helo crews and idolize the combat nurses who, just as the vignette you heard, demonstrated their loving care and comforting faces were the last memories of so many people on this wall. I'd like to commend the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, Jim, what a job you do, and the National Park Service Superintendent, to preserve the legacy. And Superintendent Reinhold just told me there that there are 5 million visitors to this site every year. While mournful, it recognizes each and every one of these brave men and women, and there are 58,318 names on these granite slabs with the V depicting the most fearsome fighting of the Vietnam War, including the Tet Offensive in early 1968. I have many friends whose names are on the wall, and especially in that V. Let me tell you about 6 of them as representatives of all of them. And I think Jim is going to put their photographs up on the website. If you want to see what these men look like, you can. Dick Pershing was my college classmate and friend. He was in the famed 101st Airborne. He was KIA on 17 February 68 during Tet. Best I can figure, I was about 10 miles away. Second Lieutenant Richard Pershing lies alongside his grandfather, General of the Army John J. Pershing, at the highest point of Arlington Cemetery. Yesterday, my wife Diane and my youngest son and my youngest daughter went up to see Dick and put some flowers on his grave. As I sat there and thought about Dick, I thought what he might have become, given his enormous charm, wit, and grace. Staff Sergeant Richard Jackson was my first platoon sergeant when I joined India, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, in May 1968, specifically 10 May 68. I doubt I'd be here today without his guidance and friendship. Jack was killed on 6 September 67 on Operation Swift, one of the toughest battles of the war. Jack's buried in Iceland, Long Island. His son Ricardo was an outstanding FedEx IT executive for many years. and his wife Mary remains a friend of one of our daughters, who's a commander in the Navy Reserve assigned to the Marines as an ER nurse, general. Two of my platoon leaders after I became skipper of K-35, Jack Ruggles and Joe Campbell, are on the wall. Jack was a Tennessee ball through and through. Jack was lost during TET, and Joe on Operation Allen Brook, 15 June 68. I visited Joe in Stoneham, Massachusetts last year, and I'll stop by to see Jack soon in June on a trip I have up to East Tennessee. I'll also visit Ruggles Field, a beautiful little league park overlooking the river just south of Knoxville. We named it in his honor. Hank Kolakowski was a graduate of the Naval Academy, class of 1961. He commanded our company on Allen Brook and was killed at the same time Joe Campbell was. Ski would have been a general